Good evening, everyone. My name is Rodney, and it's good to welcome you here to our Maundy Thursday service at St. Paul Lutheran. For those of you who are joining us at home in our recorded service, welcome. Thank you for choosing to pray with us on this beginning of these holy 3 days, the Triduum, where we journey with Christ from his last meal with his disciples through his passion and death to that glorious good news of resurrection on Sunday. So we are happy to gather to enter into this time of prayer. I'd love to remember, especially tonight, that we gather literally with people all over the world tonight. And we are engaged in a ritual, in a prayer that is thousands of years old. And so there's a kind of a seriousness, a solemnity, an importance that gets reflected in that. And you'll see it in our rituals tonight that remind us of how Jesus taught us to be disciples in the world. That is the question after all, right? What meaning does any of this have for us or for the world? And that's what we're going to think about tonight. That's what we're going to experience tonight. And so as we gather tonight, I just invite you to take a deep breath as we gather. Allow yourself to be here in this space, in this time. As you breathe, recognize that your breath is ruach, breath of God, very name of God. Our God is as close to us right now as our own breath. So let any of the cares of the day, any of the distractions of the day melt away. This is where you are called to be and nowhere else. So I invite you to rise as we enter into our prayer tonight, making the sign of the cross, sign of our baptisms, as we say in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Friends in Christ, in this Lenten season that we are leaving at this time, we have heard our Lord's call to struggle against sin, death, and the devil. All that keeps us from loving God and each other. This is the struggle to which we were called at baptism. Within the community of the church, God never wearies of forgiving sin and giving the peace of reconciliation. On this night, let us confess our sin against God and against our neighbor and express in song our desire to grow during these 3 great days, reconciling with God and with one another. God of day and God of darkness, now we stand before the night. As the shadows stretch and deepen, come and make our darkness bright. All creation still is groaning for the dawning of your might. When the sun of peace and justice fills the earth with radiant light, still the nations curse the dark. justice, so we do what you would do. Let us call people holy, let us pledge our lives anew. Make us one with all the lowly, let us all be one in you. My friends, God, who is rich in mercy, loved us even when we were dead in sin, and made us alive together with Christ. By grace, you have been saved. As a called and ordained minister of the Church of Christ, I declare in the name of Jesus, the Christ, your sins are forgiven. Holy Spirit, strengthen you with power as Christ lives in your hearts through faith. Amen. Let us continue our celebration by singing together Where Charity and Love Prevail. The Lord be with you.
Also with you.
Let us pray together. Holy God, source of all love, on the night of his betrayal, Jesus gave us a new commandment to love one another as he loves us. Write this commandment in our hearts and give us the will to serve others as he was the servant of all. Your Son, Jesus Christ, our Savior and Lord, who lives and reigns with you and Holy Spirit, one God, now and forever. Amen. I invite you to be seated for the proclamation of the word.
Good evening. Our first reading this evening is from Exodus chapter 12, the Message. God said to Moses and Aaron while still in Egypt, "This month is to be the first month of the year for you. Address the whole community of Israel. Tell them that on the 10th of this month, each man is to take a lamb for his family, one lamb to a house. If the family is too small for a lamb, then share it with a close neighbor, depending on the number of persons involved. Be mindful of how much each person will eat. Your lamb must be a healthy male, 1 year old. You can select it from either the sheep or the goats. Keep it penned until the 14th day of this month and then slaughter it. The entire community of Israel will do this at dusk. Then take some of the blood and smear it on the 2 doorposts and the lintel of the houses in which you will eat it. You are to eat the meat roasted in the fire that night, along with bread made without yeast and bitter herbs. Don't eat any of it raw or boiled in water. Make sure it's roasted, the whole animal, head, legs, and innards. Don't leave any of it until morning. If there are leftovers, burn them in the fire. And here is how you are to eat it. Be fully dressed with your sandals on and your stick in your hand. Eat it in a hurry. It's the Passover to God. I will go through the land of Egypt on this night and strike down every firstborn in the land of Egypt, whether human or animal, and bring judgment on all the gods of Egypt. I am God. The blood will serve as a sign on the houses where you live. When I see the blood, I will pass over you. No disaster will touch you when I strike the land of Egypt. This is to be a memorial day for you. You will celebrate it as a festival to God down through the generations, a fixed festival celebration to be observed always. And you will eat unraised bread, matzah, days. On the first day, get rid of all the yeast from your houses. Anyone who eats anything with yeast from the first day to the 7th day will be cut off from Israel. The 1st and the 7th days are set aside as holy. Do not work on those days. Only what you have to do for meals. Each person can do that. Word of God, word of life. Thanks be to God. Now we will read together from Psalm 116. I love God because he listened to me, listened as I begged for mercy. He listened so intently as I laid out my case before him. Death stared me in the face. Hell was hard on my heels. Up against it, I didn't know which way to turn. Then I called out to God for help. Please, God, I cried out, save my life. God is gracious. It is he who makes things right, our most compassionate God. God takes the side of the helpless. When I was at the end of my rope, he saved me. What can I give back to God for the blessings he's poured out on me? I'll lift high the cup of salvation, a toast to God. I'll pray in the name of God. I'll complete what I promised God I'd do, and I'll do it together with his people. When they arrive at the gates of death, God welcomes those who love him. O God, here I am, your servant, your faithful servant. Set me free for your service. I'm ready to offer the thanksgiving sacrifice and pray in the name of God. I'll complete what I have promised. God, I do, and I'll do it in the company of his people, in the place of worship, in God's house, in Jerusalem, God's city. The second reading is from 1 Corinthians chapter 11, 23 through 26 from the Message. Let me go over it with you again exactly what goes on at the Lord's Supper and why it is so centrally important. I received my instructions from the Master himself and passed them on to you. The Master, Jesus, on the night of his betrayal, took bread. Having given thanks, he broke it and said, "This is my body broken for you. Do this to remember me." After supper, he did the same thing with the cup. "This cup is my blood, my new covenant with you. Each time you drink this cup, remember me." What you must solemnly realize is that every time you eat this bread and every time you drink this cup, you reenact the words and actions of the death of the Master. You will be drawn back to this meal again and again until the Master returns. You must never let familiarity breed contempt. Word of God, word of life.
Thanks be to God.
The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
I invite you to rise for the proclamation of the Holy Gospel according to St. John, the 13th chapter.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Just before the Passover feast, Jesus knew that the time had come to leave this world to go to the Father. Having loved his dear companions, he continued to love them right to the end. It was supper time. The devil by now had Judas, son of Simon the Iscariot, firmly in his grip, all set for the betrayal. Jesus knew that the Father had put him in complete charge of everything, that he came from God and was on his way back to God. So he got up from the supper table, set aside his robe, and put on an apron. And then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the feet of the disciples, drying them with his apron. When he got to Simon Peter, Peter said, "Master, you wash my feet?" Jesus answered, "You don't understand now what I'm doing, but it will be clear enough to you later." Peter persisted, "You're not going to wash my feet, ever." Jesus said, "If I don't wash you, you can't be part of what I'm doing, Peter." "Master," said Peter, "not only my feet then, wash my hands, wash my head, wash my whole body." But Jesus said, "If you've had a bath in the morning, you only need your feet washed now, and you're clean from head to toe. My concern, you understand, is holiness, not hygiene. So now you're clean, but not every one of you." He knew who was betraying him, and that's why he said, "Not every one of you." After he had finished washing their feet, he took his robe, put it back on, and went back to his place at the table. And then Jesus said, "Do you understand what I have done for you? You address me as teacher and master, and rightly so. That is what I am. So if I, the master and the teacher, washed your feet, you must now wash each other's feet. I've laid down a pattern for you. What I've done, you do." I'm only pointing out the obvious. A servant is not ranked above his master. An employee doesn't give orders to the employer. If you understand what I'm telling you, act like it and live a blessed life. The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. I invite you to be seated. So tonight, we, the church, enter into this Triduum, these 3 days that are one liturgy, one continuous act of prayer that has begun already with us this evening. Tonight we enter into this story by remembering that Christ gave us the Eucharist. It's what's called the institution or the beginning of the Eucharist, the commemorative meal that we are called to over and over and over again in thanksgiving for what God has done and is doing in our lives. I was really caught in that reading Lois shared with us at the end. Don't let familiarity breed contempt when it comes to this meal that Paul told us about. The meaning of this meal. What is it? I'm baffled by the people or the cultures that say, no, we don't really need to celebrate communion. We don't really need to do Eucharist. In fact, Christ gave it to us as the primary sacrament to unite us, to bring us into union with Him, and to show us and to tell us what it means to be His disciple. Not only back then, but now. What does it mean to be His disciple? So we remember the institution of the Eucharist by telling the story, by remembering that He gathered with His disciples on this very decisive night when He is going to be betrayed, the night before He died. He says to them, I've longed to share this meal with you because I love you. This is the meal of community, of remembrance, of essence of who we are. I've longed to share this meal with you. And the people who gathered around Him, they were there too, expecting much from this meal. What do you think the apostles were expecting when they gathered with Jesus that night? The synoptic gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, tell us it was a Passover meal. And if it is in fact a Passover meal, it's loaded with symbols that we still see in our communion rite today. Those 4 cups of wine that they drink throughout the Passover meal perhaps suggest to us what some of those apostles might have been expecting as they gathered with Jesus that night. They knew it was coming to an end. He had told them. They were in Jerusalem. He told them that's where prophets go to die. They saw the foment among the leadership as Jesus had healed and taught, and the people responded to the power of God emanating through Him. There was much disturbance, and the apostles felt the tension. Some of them would have been there to celebrate that first cup of sanctification. We're here because we're being made holy. We're being cleansed by our God again, just as our ancestors were in the exile. Cleansed to be God's people in the world. And that would have been enough for them. And then there were others sitting around the table. We heard a reference to one of them tonight, Judas, who would have been there to celebrate the second cup, the cup of wrath. That's where we hear Exodus 12 read again, when the plague came upon the Egyptians and there was death that led to the freeing of the Israelites. Judas and his fellow insurrectionists certainly were wanting the overthrow of the Romans. They wanted God's wrath showered down upon the people that night. They saw themselves as the instruments of the prophecies of Zephaniah and Zechariah that said the nation will be freed from its oppressors. And they were the ones who were going to bring it about. And it is no doubt in my mind that Judas saw in Jesus the way to make it happen. His popularity, his power, his strength. Judas and some of the others around the table, those zealots, wanted the cup of wrath to be the experience that night. Others were there for the cup of blessing, the birkat hamatzon. Our cup overflows because our God has chosen us. Our God is blessing us in spite of the oppression. We are the chosen people of God. Yes, we suffer. Yes, we are not always free. Yes, sometimes we choose to follow the wrong paths, but God blesses us as a people again and again. And for others, it's that fourth cup, the cup of praise that looks to a future, God's future, when the nation is restored and freed. But they saw it in line with Christ's mission through love, compassion, forgiveness. They were praising God for these gifts that came to them. They were at the table that night with many expectations, but Jesus turns the whole experience on his head. Not his head, on its head. Jesus flips their expectations over when? During that cup of sanctification, at the beginning of the meal. He is, after all, the master and the teacher. He is the host of the meal. At the beginning of a Passover meal, the host usually gets up and washes his hands. And then a little bit later in the meal, the host goes and washes the hands of everybody at the table to bring them into the ritual. It's an act of cleansing. Jesus does something completely different. As master and teacher, he doesn't wash their hands. He takes off his robe and takes on the role, the servant. He takes the basin and the towel and goes and washes their feet. It's no longer the focus on the cups. It's no longer the focus on the expectation of being freed of oppression. No, he talks about the purpose of being the followers of him and listening to the will of God. He gives meaning to their gathering, not only for that night, but meaning to their lives beyond what is soon to be the most confusing and earth-shattering experience they could experience. The death, the brutal death of their teacher and master. He gives them what they need to go forward. They don't understand it at the time. We hear it in Peter's protest. But Jesus, in his way, patient and kind and always the teacher, you will understand soon enough. Just let me do it for now, Peter. I want to share with you a reflection from Ronald Roheiser. He's a theologian, a writer, a teacher, pastor. And this is what he says about Holy Thursday. And I think it emphasizes again what's at the heart of this tonight. A little bit what I'm inviting you to reflect on through these scriptures tonight. What difference does it make that we gather in this space, in this time? Ronald says, we might find it curious that on Maundy Thursday, when we are celebrating the institution of the Eucharist, the gospel is taken from John's version of the Last Supper, Where the other Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, have Jesus taking bread and wine and consecrating it, making it holy for holy purposes, John has him taking a basin and a towel and washing his disciples' feet. What has this to do with Eucharist? Everything. Scholars estimate that John's gospel was written somewhere around 90 to 100 AD, some 70 years after the Jesus event, after Jesus' life, death, and resurrection. John, if he himself actually did do the writing, would be a man well in his 90s. And he would have been a man who had now seen more than 70 years of church life. 70 years of church life then is like 70 years of church life today. They fought about almost everything, not least of all about the Eucharist. How often should it be celebrated? To what aspect of Jesus' life and teaching should it be most attached? Who presides? Who provides the food? What do we do with the money we collect? By the time John wrote his gospel, there were already different and competing theologies about the Eucharist, about the celebration of the sacrament at the table in the early church. So, hence, rather than highlighting the bread and the wine at the Last Supper, John highlights instead the basin and the towel. By doing this, the 90-something beloved disciple, in substance, is saying, this is what the Eucharist means. It asks us to move beyond our divisions and reach across our differences by this kind of humility. As a pastor, Ron says, I have always found the actual ritual of washing feet during Maundy Thursday service to be awkward. There is no aesthetic or nice way of doing it. For years, I hated the ritual until one day I realized that awkwardness was an essential part of it. It is meant to be awkward because it is awkward and uncomfortable to reach across to others when there are differences, when we are at odds with other people. We do it anyway as Christians because it has everything to do with the way we live as disciples in the world. And so, my friends, while we ritualize the symbolic absence of Christ this evening, we are asked to consider, what will I do this evening or tomorrow to communicate love, care, service, humility to your family member, to a coworker, to a neighbor? What will you do, really, if not wash feet? What does that kind of service look like? How will you bring Christ to another by humble service? I'd invite you to ponder that as we listen to a song together. It's a song by Michael Card. And it's, I think, one of the most beautiful theologies of what Jesus was teaching us in this simple act of washing feet.
In an upstairs room,
To engage the mandatum, the command from Jesus to wash each other's feet. And For a long time, the church has observed this ritual by inviting the pastor to wash people's feet, to remind us what Christ did at the supper that evening. I know some of you have been invited to allow me to wash your feet tonight, and if that's the case, I would invite you to come up and have a seat in the chairs in the front. And after I've washed a few people's feet, a few courageous people who aren't embarrassed by their toes or overly ticklish, we see what Christ intended us to do for each other. You can come forward and take a seat if you're willing to let me wash your feet. And after that, after I wash their feet, you are invited to participate in the same ritual actions. There's 2 basins and towel stations in the back. There will be 2 here in the front. If you would like to invite somebody to allow you to wash their hands or their feet as a sign of care, as a gesture of love, of concern, of kindness, I would encourage you to do that. Take the risk to do that tonight. We'll create some time, some space to allow you to pray your way into Christ's mandatum. I would love to have more volunteers. I have 6 chairs. You can take your shoes off. That's fine. talking about holiness, not hygiene. I know in our culture, this idea of foot washing is foreign to us. But it's really an incredible symbolic act if you think of what it takes to get down on your hands and knees before somebody. You make yourself vulnerable. And so, if nothing else, tonight and tomorrow, think about how you allow yourself to be vulnerable to another person. Vulnerable to them because power is not called for. To build the other person up, you let them be the one in power. And so there's much to reflect on, much to think about in Christ's mandatum to us, to wash each other's feet. So let's continue to ponder that, to reflect upon that. As we continue our prayer at this time, I would invite Alan to come forward and to lead us in our prayers of the church. And as you reflect on your own lives, who are those people? What are those situations that you would like to join to the prayers of the church tonight? Especially think about those folks who need reconciliation from you, who need to have you wash their feet. I would invite you to rise and join us in prayer.
In these holiest of days, we offer prayers for ourselves, our neighbors, and our world. We pray for the church around the world. Write your new commandment of love on the heart of every believer and strengthen pastors and lay leaders in humble service for your people. Merciful God. We pray for the good earth you have made. Protect fields, orchards, local farms, and gardens. Inspire us with the new life budding around us, that we show more care for plants and all living creatures. Merciful God.
Receive our prayer.
We pray for leaders in every land. Kindle compassion and equity, and all who are called to administer justice. Guide all in positions of power away from the temptations of abuse and toward work for the common good. Merciful God.
Receive our prayer.
We pray for all who are in need, especially those who are incarcerated or unjustly accused. Illuminate paths to end oppression and form supportive communities gathered around a common commitment to justice and peace. Merciful God.
Receive our prayer.
We pray for this congregation and all who gather to receive your body and blood this night. Fill us at this shared table and nourish us well to heed your examples of grace. Send us in love to those who cannot be with us due to illness. Merciful God.
Receive our prayer.
We give thanks for those who have died in the faith and who we remember now. Teach us by their example and comfort us as we mourn. Renew us by the promise of life together with you. Merciful God.
Receive our prayer.
We offer to you these petitions and those we carry in our hearts, trusting in your abundant and ever-present mercy.
Amen. Thank you, Colin. The peace of the risen Lord be with you always.
And also with you.
Take a few moments to share Christ's peace with those around you. So when we gather for worship for the Eucharist, One of the ways that we say thank you to God is by offering back some of what we have received, time, treasure, and talent. We haven't started passing the plates yet, but you see the envelopes showed up in the pews now, so there's that part of it. Thank you for the ways that you share your treasure, especially to support our mission and ministry here at St. Paul. For the ways that you share your time and your talent to lift people up, to be with people who are hurting. You are generous in your response to God's goodness. And so let us together offer our prayer of thanksgiving. Extravagant God, you have blessed us with the fullness of creation. Now we gather at your feast, where you offer us the food that satisfies. Take and use what we offer here. Come among us and feed us with the body and blood of Christ, in whose name we pray. Amen. I want to invite Harper to come and join me at the table. Harper is going to receive First Communion this evening. She and her family are here. Daniel and Brooke and Connor, and so we welcome you all here. Come on over here. I'm not going to bite you. I need you to help me. Stand over here, okay? Here, in fact, why don't you be on this side? So, can you say this? The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Lift up your hearts.
We lift them to the Lord.
Let us give thanks to the Lord our God.
It is right to give our thanks and praise.
Father, all-powerful and ever-living God, we do well always and everywhere to give you thanks through Jesus Christ our Lord. This great season of grace is your gift to your family to renew us in spirit. You give us strength to purify our hearts. You control our desires and so to serve you in freedom. You teach us how to live in this passing world with our hearts set on the world that will never end. Now, with all the saints and angels, we praise you forever as we sing. Holy, holy, holy Lord, Lord God of power and might, heaven and earth are full of your glory. Hosanna in the highest. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna in the highest. Let us now remember Christ's great love for us as we sing the song of our Eucharist. Remember now, my children. Nancy did not fall down. She's searching for the music. Yay! The night of his betrayal, our Lord took bread. He blessed it as he broke it, and then he said, "My body broken for you is what this means. Remember now, my children, what you have seen." And then he took a chalice and raised it high. My blood is given for you, a full supply, a covenant, a promise, a cleansing stream. Remember now, my children, what you have seen. We share this food And so, as we heard at that night that Jesus was betrayed, he was with his disciples at table. They were terrified at the thought of losing him. And so, when they asked him, Lord, teach us to pray, he gave them a prayer of communion, one that could be prayed through all time. And so, let us join our voices together now as we say together the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. My friends, Christ has prepared this meal for those of us who thirst and those of us who hunger. Come to the table where all are welcome and all are fed.
And when
The body and blood of our Lord Jesus Christ strengthen you and keep you in his grace. Amen. Invite you to rise. Let us pray together. Lord Jesus, in a wonderful sacrament, you strengthen us with the saving power of your suffering, death, and resurrection. May this sacrament of your body and blood so work in us that the fruits of your redemption will show forth in the way we live. For you live and reign with the Father and Holy Spirit, one God, now and forever. Amen. We now prepare to move from the experience of the shared table to the experience of the agony in the garden and the time when Jesus was taken from his disciples. Invite Scott to come forward and to read for us a section of Mark 14. And allow your hearts and your minds, I would invite you even to close your eyes as you listen to this passage that moves us into the next part of our Triduum experience.
In the middle of this, the chief priest stood up and asked Jesus, "What do you have to say to the accusation?" Jesus was silent. He said nothing. The chief priest tried again, this time asking, "Are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed?" Jesus said, "Yes, I am, and you'll see it yourself. The Son of Man seated at the right hand of the Mighty One, arriving on the clouds of heaven." The chief priest lost his temper. Ripping his clothes, he yelled, "Did you hear that? After that, do we need witnesses? You heard the blasphemy. Are you going to stand for it?" They condemned him, one and all. The sentence, death. Some of them started spitting at him. They blindfolded his eyes, then hit him, saying, "Who hit you? Prophesy!" The guards, punching and slapping, took him away to be held in prison overnight.
God, the Son of God, should take our mortal form for mortal sake. He sent no angel to our race of higher or of lower place, but wore the robe of human frame, and to this world himself he came. For us baptized, for us he bore his holy fast and hungered sore. For us temptation sharp he knew, for us the tempter overthrew. For us he prayed, for us he taught, for us his daily works he wrought, by words and signs and actions